All right, folks. Well, you know you're in for a treat when you hear that tune because it's time for another week of the Rec Poker Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Reid, Bluffsterini in the home game and at Rec Poker Jim on socials. And I have the best freaking job in the world talking poker with my friends here on the Strategy Forums edition of the podcast every Monday night while we steal each other's chips in the free nightly home game. Now, I'm pleased to mention that we're brought to you by Running Aces. They're the official sponsor of the Rec Poker Podcast, and they're located less than an hour north of the Twin Cities in the beautiful state of Minnesota. Find out more about them at runaces.com. Most of what we do here at Rec Poker is free. We're a largely volunteer-based organization, so we really depend on support from our sponsors and also from our premium members who take part in our training material and study opportunities for only 22 bucks a month. Now you can sign up for free. Everything starts with a free account at RecPoker, where all you need to join is an email address and a smile, although we do insist on both. But you can always get your first month of premium for only $5 by using the code RecPoker at checkout. And if $5 or our regular monthly price of $22 feels like a lot to you, I totally get it. Please make a donation of any amount to your local food bank. Send us a copy of your donation receipt, even for $1, and we'll give you a free month of premium membership here at RecPoker as a way of saying thanks. So I hope you do head on over to RecPoker and see how you can get involved for free. Now, they let me host the show on Mondays, but I'm only one man, one small cog in the RecPoker machine. We've got a whole crew of people over here making the magic happen. We call this group of wizards the RECing Crew. If you want to learn more about me or the rest of the RECing Crew, you can go to rec.poker/crew, or you're going to listen up because you're going to hear from one other of the OGs of the RecPoker RECing Crew, our own Rob Washington. Rob, jump in.
Yeah, I'm Rob Washam. You can find me as Rabman50 just about everywhere. And on the first and third Wednesdays of every month, I host a group of premium members as we talk about the latest strategic poker.
That's right. We have a bunch of different Wrecking Crew members here, all with their different areas of expertise. Rob's been hosting the book study for several years, and it's one of the best things that we do over here. I mentioned earlier that you can become a premium member very easily. One of the perks is not just the book studies and all the other study groups that we have around here. You can also come and join the forums edition of the show on Monday nights. So I'm so pleased when our premium members do come in and say hello. We're joined this week by Joe Millay. Regular listeners might be familiar with his name. He's been a premium member for a while, and he's making great strides as a player. Joe, thanks for joining us. And why don't you just introduce yourself to Rec Poker Nation?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. My name's Joe Millay. I'm JM Atapi in the home game.
And we're actually going to be looking at a hand that Joe played in the home game tonight. This is one of the really fun things that I love about our free play money home game club. You're playing against other players, all trying to improve together. The prizes are real, the games are free, and we get some fantastic hands to talk about with our group here. And it's all just part of our learning experience here at Rec Poker. So we're looking at a hand where Joe has one of my favorite hands, which is the ace four suited. In this case, it's the ace four of spades, and he's in my favorite position, sitting back on the button, just waiting for all the good EV to flow his way, as it does when you're in the best possible position pre-flop and post-flop. So far, we're doing everything right, Joe. Got a great hand. You got the best seat in the house. You're bringing your hands to the Rec Poker podcast. I mean, flawless performance so far. Love and life. So this hand, we're playing about 30 big blinds effective, and it's seven-handed at the moment at the table. The earliest position player is in middle position, according to Eric Jin's seating chart. They open to two big blinds, and it folds around to us on the button. Again, we're holding the ace of spades, four of spades. We've got about 30 big blinds, and we're faced with our first decision point. In my mind, and I'm curious to know what Rob's thoughts are here, the only wrong answer is to fold, facing two big blinds with a suited wheel ace. This is a spot we want to be in. We can either take that line by calling or by three betting. I'm sure it's a mix if you look it up in your favorite solver. Rob, do you have a default position for sort of how to play spots like this, single raise pots in position with the suited wheel ace?
Yeah, I believe that this would be a 100% call.
All right.
I don't know that you're going to be doing a lot of three betting with this. First of all, because of the position of the opener.
Right.
Now, if the opener had been the button, for instance, then yeah, then that probably opens up a lot of opportunities to three bet bluff, which is what ace four basically is, right? I mean, if you look at your a linear range, you wouldn't find, you might find ace four in there, but that would be just a straight call. So if you're looking at the opportunity to three bet somebody, especially somebody opening from the button, and if they are a looser type of player, you could expect to get a lot of folds by three betting, take down the pot, and not have to worry about it, which is always very nice. Um, but in this particular case, we had an open from uh, a very well-known player, as a matter of fact. Somebody that is near and dear to the hearts of anybody that's been on our Discord server. He's not, Joe has like 700 hands on him or something like that, and he's V-pipping 18% with a pre-flop raise of 12%. So he's not opening real wide, and especially from that position, I'm expecting him to have a pretty decent hand if he's opening in that position. So um, being at be that as it may, I believe we need to just check here. And looking at GTO Wizard agrees.
All right. So Rob, you're saying we're going to play this as a call.
Yep.
We get to see a flop with a hand that makes a lot of flushes and straights. When it does make flushes, it's the nut flush. It's a good candidate to use as a three bet bluff when you're facing someone who has a wider opening range. But because this opening range is relatively tight and they don't have a lot of air in it, you don't think there's a lot of fold equity to be gained by three betting here. So we're going to play it as a call. Totally makes sense to me. It is one of ace five suited and ace four suited are sort of my two favorite three bet bluffs. But sometimes you just shouldn't have a three bet bluffing range. And, facing an early position raiser from a relatively tight opening, then maybe that's one of those spots where we can just be three betting purely for value. And we don't need to sort of be balanced in that way. So that is the only argument, though, whether to three bet bluff here or to call. Joe, when you're playing in the home game club or outside of it, is this a hand that you think about three betting with from time to
I did,
time, or
yeah.
are you more of like a value three bet player?
I thought about it in this situation. Um, I'm curious when you say if he was on the button, if he would three bet in from the blinds, this would
That's
be
what
three
Rob's
bet bluff
saying.
from
Yeah,
the blinds. Yeah,
if Rob was in the blinds and this player opened from the buttons, because the buttons opening range is so wide,
Mhm.
yeah,
you want
yeah,
you want to be three betting with a polarized range. So
Yep.
yeah.
also would be the case if they were in the cutoff and we were in the button.
Yeah,
I think
right. A
Rob would
cutoff
also.
in our position. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And the only thing is, my hesitancy if on the in the blinds is that then you're out of position post flop,
Well, that's why you
and
want a
that
three bet so you can get him to fold that crap
I
that he's
gotcha.
trying
So
to steal
you're
the blinds with.
okay. All right, makes sense. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
So you don't
but
want him to
it's
bet. You don't want him to call your free
You
bet.
don't want him
Yeah,
to call. But if
got
he
it.
does call, you have an ace four suited, so you still have a hand that you can go post flop with.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
when we're looking for those, and this is a good example, like if they were on the button and we were in the blinds, when we are three betting, we want to have the kind of hands that do a lot of different things for us. So ace four suited, by having an ace in our hand, we block them from having the very strongest hands significantly. Having an ace in your hand makes a big difference to the odds of them having aces or ace king or ace queen. But you can also make the nut flush because you've got a suited hand, and when you do, it's the nuts. And you can also make a wheel straight. So when we think about like semi-bluff three betting, we want folds. The goal is to get folds, and that's why Rob says he won't do it against a tight opening range. The strength of our hand, the way that our hand can perform post flop is really like a just in case they call. We'd rather have all these different ways so that we can continue suggesting that we have pocket aces. It's honestly,
Okay.
it's less about the equity when called, although that's important. But as much of it, it's the ability to c bet on a lot of different boards. Because when you three bet in spots like this, you're kind of saying, I've got pocket aces, I've got pocket kings, I've got pocket queens. And if the board comes 10, 10, 10 7 2 with two spades, you can continue betting as though you have pocket aces or pocket kings or pocket queens because you have the backup equity of the flush draw. So it's really a sort of like just in case they call, we want to have those kind of hands. But yeah, we would
Yeah.
much prefer that they fold if we just win 100% of the pot right there.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
so we do call, and the small blind folds and the big blind calls, and they're playing off a 12 big blind stack. It won't really come up much, but they that does introduce a dynamic into the hand here. So the board comes Jack of spades, six of spades, seven of diamonds, which is a really good outcome for us. Honestly, the Jack high board doesn't really smash the opening range of our original razor. They're going to have some jacks, but they're going to have more like queens and kings and aces. So that's pretty good. And of course, we picked up a front door flush draw to spades. And we also picked up a back door of straight draw by having 4, 6, 7 all available to us. So lots of good cards to come. Lots of cards help us. We have a lot of equity in the hand. The big blind checks. The under the gun razor bets about 2.5 big blinds into a 7.5 pot, so about 1/3. And now it's our decision again. And again, I think the only thing we can do wrong is fold. I think calling here and trying to realize our equity, we have a ton of equity in this hand, and we're in position. So we can only do so many things wrong by calling here. But I want to examine raising. This is a kind of spot where my favorite raises post flop, my favorite bluffs are spots where we have high equity in the hand, but low showdown value. And this is one of those spots where we have a flush draw, we have a backdoor straight draw, we have a lot of equity there, but ace high isn't a lot of showdown value by the time we get all to the river. It's better than being jack high. It's not trivial, but against an early position raise, they have a lot of aces too. They're going to be better aces than ours. So I would consider raising the flop here, and we're basically repping that we have pocket sixes or pocket sevens. Um, or I guess ace jack would be one of the hands that we would have here sometimes. Or I mean, we might even call with pocket jacks. So we do have a lot of strong hands on this board. Um, and I think we can get in a few semi-bluff raises as well. So there's an argument for
So
calling, there's an argument for raising. What do you guys think? How would you like to approach
what
spots like this?
what would be the bet size if you're going to raise, in your guys'
Great
opinion?
question. Great question. So you're in position, so it can be a little smaller than if you were out of position,
Okay.
but you really want to put the player to a difficult decision. So they made it 2.5 big blinds. The worst thing you can do, in my opinion, I think this is true, is just like click it back because it doesn't really put a lot of fold equity on them. You still have enough big blinds back in your stack that um, you're you're not really threatening their stack as effectively as you would with a larger sizing. I don't know. It kind of does put them in a dirty spot, but I'd rather. Rob, what's your perfect sizing here? 7.5 in the middle. They bet for 2.5. Make it like,
Yeah, probably about six. I mean, keep in mind that we only have 30 big blinds,
hmm.
so we don't want to get too carried away. Um, we could go probably six. I think six big blinds. That's what, a little over two, 2.5 maybe. So yeah, six and a half big blinds.
So it is kind of that we're threatening.
Right.
Uh, so yeah. So I when I
Two and a
see
half
spots
is the
like
minimum
this,
is probably the minimum I would want to raise. Two
yeah,
and a half big blinds. I mean, two and
and
a half times his bet size.
2.5
Yeah.
times his bet size. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
that's right. Um, One of the things I'm always thinking about is on what street, like, do I want to make a big bet with this? Because in a spot like this where we're semi-bluffing, we have to be cognizant of, okay, so is this a spot where I'm going to raise it? So again, I know we're kind of all over the place here, but this is the world in which we are going to raise. If we're going to raise here, we have to be thinking about, are we going to raise here and shove the turn while we still have equity? Like if a spade doesn't come, are we going to shove the turn with a bigger bet and apply more fold equity? And if they call, we still have, a spade to come on the river. Or are we going to make a small raise here to freeze them, and then we can check back the turn and see all five cards and see if we make our flush and then decide whether to put chips in the middle? Or, is this a spot where we're going to try and make small bets throughout? I'm not sure which the right answer is necessarily, but it's something that you should be thinking about when you decide whether to raise here. Because what really matters is what's the effective stack going to be afterwards. Like, so let's take Rob's example. If they lead 2.5 and we raise it to 7, let's say, and they call, then there's going to be 21 in the hat in the middle and about 22 big blinds back for us. Is that right? 7, about 21. So we're going to have about a pot size bet left.
That's PR
Um,
one. Yeah.
yeah. So when we get to the turn, if we make that raise size, there's going to be a pot size bet left, which is valuable. And then it's up to us to decide, are we going to shove the turn or are we going to shove the river? I think we could also just shove the flop, honestly. It's a wet board, it's a dynamic board. If we did have a hand like a set of sixes or a set of sevens, we don't want to see any spades. We don't want to see a lot of those like 8, 9, 10 cards that bring in the straight. We don't know how the big blind's going to react. So, like so many of these decisions, I'm not sure there's a right answer here.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
First,
yeah.
first of all, I want to mention that leading the flop from out of position, like our villain did, is not very common. It's
Do you
more
mean C
common
betting?
in this, yeah, c betting the flop from out of position is not very common. Normally, basically, you would be doing a lot of checking here, even with some strong hands. Even with jacks in your hands, you should be checking a lot of the time because you're out of position and you're giving um, the in position player an opportunity to make a mistake. Um, so basically, the fact that he the fact that he bet on the flop, C bet on the flop, means that he's out of flow. I mean, he's out of what would normally be a GTO type line, let's say, because there's very few C bets out of position in this spot. So he did though, and now we have an opportunity to raise. We have the type of hand that we should be raising. A lot of the times, the reason you don't want to bet out of position in that spot, C bet, is because of the potential that you could get check raised off of your, or not check raised, but re-raised off of your equity. So when you got a jack or you've got a pair, let's say a pair of nines, pair of eights, there'd be a lot of checking going on there because you don't want to get blown off your equity. You've got a little bit of equity here. You want to hang on to it. By betting out, he gave you the opportunity of raising him, which you probably should have been doing.
Yeah.
You know,
And he may have
probably, I
been
mean,
aware, he may took advantage of some of my inexperience, and that maybe that you said it was an atypical move, and maybe that's why he bet because he knew.
because you've shown propensity to passivity, maybe.
Yeah.
Those are two big
Yeah.
words
Right.
right back to back.
Yeah.
Nailed
Good
it
job,
though.
man. That's
Nailed it.
very impressive.
Nailed it.
So if you've been shown as being a very passive player, yeah, he might have said, "Well, I can take advantage of this. I can get him to
Yeah.
fold anything that didn't connect here at all, and the chances of him raising me are slim because this guy plays very passive."
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think that, another good argument for raising here, especially in a group like the Rec Poker Home Game Club where you're playing against the same players a lot, um,
Hmm.
is that they will sort of start to profile you, make notes on your play, make assumptions about your play. And if you are a straightforward player who's only ever raising when you have two pair or better sets and that kind of stuff, then when you raise on a board like this, they can very comfortably fold their one pair hands. And they exploit you by folding one pair hands to your raises. If they see you raising with some draws and some like semi bluffs here, they have a much more difficult decision. So like they're basically saying they have pocket queens, pocket kings, pocket aces, or ace jack or king jack or something like that. They open from relatively early position, jack seven, six, two-tone board. As Rob says, this is a three-way pot. They're out of position. They shouldn't be c-betting at a super high frequency. So when they do, they're saying like I have a strong pair, basically is what they're saying. Um, so we want to, we have an opportunity to make them feel uncomfortable about that holding. Uh, it's not wrong to call, but it's an exploit I think that we can make, but to introduce some of these raises into our game. And these are the safe raises. These are the safe bluffs, the ones where we just have a ton of equity. Um, when you have the nut flush draw on a two-tone board, like I say, the only thing you can really do wrong is fold. You just have so much equity. If you add some fold equity to that by raising, that's great. If you just get to call and evaluate on future streets, I mean that's not a big mistake either. So it's a blessing to be in this spot. So
Yeah,
we do call. Oh yeah, Rob,
the GTO says we should be raising 60% of the time here
and calling 40%, I'm sure.
and calling 40%. Yeah.
So even the solvers are like, yeah, we don't know. They're both good, you know.
Yeah.
So
And I'm
at any
saying
time.
with that specific hand. So,
Yes, 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 with ace four suited. Yep,
right.
specifically. And so I always just kind of default to when the solver says it's a mix, what is the kind of error that my opponent is more likely to make? Are they more likely to overfold to a raise, or are they more likely to overcall to a raise? Um, and then we want to just like make them make the worst possible decision. So if we think that they're more likely to overcall to a raise, I would raise with hands like pocket sevens, pocket sixes, made hands, seven, six suited, jack seven, two pair plus, where they're going to get sticky with one pair. If they're going to overfold, that really pushes me towards raising with hands like this, hands with flush draws, hands with overcards, hands with straight draws. Because you're basically relying on the fold equity to augment the equity, the draw equity that you have in your hand. So again, it really we say this a lot on the show, but like hashtag it depends, hashtag villain dependent.
Yeah.
Like it does matter a lot, especially in these spots where the solver says it's a either or. So all right. So we do call and the big blind folds. So we get to the turn. The turn is it's a spade, which is great, but it also pairs the board. It's the seven of spades. So the board is now jack of spades, six of spades, seven of diamonds, seven of spades. So literally the worst spade that could come. But our opponent checks, which they should do quite a bit here because again, most of their range is like these one pair hands. And when you call the flop, a lot of your holdings are these flush draws or these straight draws, that kind of things. So when the
Or a
flush comes
seven
in, that should kind of slow them down. Yes. Yes,
or a
exactly.
seven. You could have
Yeah, or that mid
you know,
pair, pocket
yeah,
eights, one of those.
you could have pocket eights, you could have 8-7, you could have 6-7, you could have or at 6-7 you probably would have raised, but raised on the flop. But yeah, you could
Hmm.
have a couple of hands that have a seven in them.
And
A7
any of
suited, for
those,
instance.
yeah, A7 for sure. Exactly. And any of those are gonna slow down this player who's kind of telling us that they have one pair. They might not even have as good a hand as one pair, but we're pretty confident that they have one pair a lot of the time here, whether it's queens or a paired jack or something like that. Um, That's kind of what we're assigning a lot of them to, or some of those other like two spade hands themselves, which would be great if they made a smaller flush. If they were in there with like king queen of spades, and we could overflush them here, that would be fantastic. But you'd expect them to continue betting if that was the case. So they check, and now we get to our next decision point on the turn, which is do we check back? Do we bet? And if we bet, what size do we bet? So we've got a little over 20 big blinds left. Oh no, we've got more like 25 big blinds left. And there's about 12 in the middle. So we elect for about a half pot bet. I think betting here is mandatory. We've got enough chips behind that we need to build a pot. We don't want to see scare cards coming. Like if another spade comes, that's going to slow down our opponent even more because there'll be four spades on the board. Um, the paired board might already slow them down a little bit. We're If they don't have any kind of value hand, we might still get some value from a hand like 9, 10, or some of these other drawing hands, or maybe a hand that has like the king of spades in it now would still call a bet. Um, so I think betting is important. We're not really giving up that much information by doing it. We could still have all sorts of different kinds of hands here. We do this with a seven. We do this with our full houses, hoping that they made a flush. We do this with our flushes, and we do this with some bluffs when they give up the lead by checking. So I just think I think we're betting 100% of the time. Um, and I like the sizing. This sizing allows them to continue with a lot of their range. But what I like most about it is that it sets up the river shove. So at this point, if they call this bet, and this is what I always want our players to be thinking, if this bet gets called, what will be the stack to pot ratio afterwards? It's not just a question of like how much will I have after I bet. You have to think about if the bet gets called, if the raise gets called, whatever the spot that you're in, how big will the pot be, and compare that to the effective stack size. I can't emphasize that enough. We're not used to doing that in our minds as part of this,
Hmm.
but it's really important. If you bet too much here, then when you get to the river, if they call, you're going to have a very small bet left, which is fine when we have value hands, but we can never use it to bluff. If we bet too little here, then we get to the river and we're going to have more than a pot size bet, which is great if we want to bluff, but it's going to limit how many second best hands can call us when we shove. So having that pot size bet on the river is actually it's kind of like a secret weapon. And you should really think about your sizing on flops and turns so you can get to that point. Not even that you will pull the trigger, but so that it's available to you when that time comes. Not having enough chips on future streets, having a small stack on future streets really handcuffs what you can do. Because you're much more likely to get called if you put it in. All right. Any other thoughts on the turn here?
No,
Sizing?
I think the sizing was really good on the turn bet. And we talked about this a little bit before. Should we bet or should we not? And I think we need to bet here. And you brought up a couple of those issues. Right now is when we're ahead. We feel we're ahead.
Hmm.
We don't, unless he specifically has 6-7 or Jack-7 or pocket
Or
sevens
pocket jacks would be yeah,
or
yeah.
pocket jacks. Yeah, we should feel like we are ahead now. But I think pocket jacks bets on this
Oh, great
turn.
point.
So I
Yeah.
don't know that he has pocket jacks and is checking it back
Probably,
unless
honestly,
he's trying to
probably
slow unless he's trying to slow play the heck out of us. But
I,
that
you know what, Rob? I think you're right though. I think he's betting all his full houses here
yeah,
because he
yeah.
wants to get called. Like we have a lot of
It's
flush draws. When the
it's
flush comes in,
right. And it's the same with him as it is with us.
right.
By betting on the turn, this is the one last opportunity you have to bet before the hand is established. So right now, if he's on some sort of a draw, he has hope, you know.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
so you can still get value from that hope that he can hit the card he wants on the river. So I think it's very important to bet here. And that is the main reason. Not only does he still have hope to call, but you could get a card on the river that could be a scare card, like Jim
Mhm.
talked about. If the fourth spade hit the river, all of a sudden you're not going to get any value out of your nut flush because he would need to have you know he would need to have a spade in his hand to make a call. So
So
yeah, so you're going to lose value if you don't bet this turn.
yeah, definitely. So our villain does call, and I think that tells us so much in like this is a huge inflection point for the hand here. So when they check call on this, it really leads me to believe that they have a one pair hand. Queens, pocket queens with the queen of spades, pocket kings with the king of spades. They could have pocket aces. No, we have the ace of spades, so they couldn't have that. And we're so like it's less likely they have aces at all. Um, King Jack, Queen Jack with the king of spades with the queen of spades. I don't think they're opening a lot of Jack 10 here, but they could be doing that with a spade. Um, and so
But from their go
yeah,
ahead.
Joe. No, no, please, please.
Well, from their perspective, if they're calculating, so that's what is it, half pot bet,
Yep.
25% pot odds. So they got to be thinking they're outs, right? And so
At
they got
this
to be
point,
thinking,
yeah, facing your bet,
so
they should be thinking about if they're behind, what are their outs? Yeah.
well, they're outs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for them,
Then
if they have like a one spade hand, then they're that's going to be a lot of their outs are going to be that fourth spade coming.
yeah,
Um, and if they don't, then it's going to be like if they've got pocket queens, a queen gives them the boat. A seven also gives them the boat, right? If there's three on the table and they've got a pocket pair, those hands are going to beat your flushes if that's what they're worried about you having.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. But if I'm just okay, so if I'm adding up, if they have pocket queens, so they have what, three outs, four outs,
they've got
right?
well,
Because
they've
they got the
got
seven,
yeah, they've got two queens and one seven. Or two queens
two
and
sevens.
two sevens. So that's four right there for effectively the nuts at that point.
Yeah,
But they also have all the spade hands, all the fourth spade ones. So like the two of spades, the three of
yeah,
spades, the five of spades, those would all give them a queen high flush, which is still a value hand, even if it's not the
yeah,
nuts on
yeah.
a paired board. So they'd probably
So,
consider that their outs
yeah,
as well.
okay, yeah,
And they might still just call with, like I say, like a pocket queens without the queen of spades. Because now they've got two pair. They've got queens and sevens. If you've got ace jack, they're doing great against you.
yeah.
You'd play a jack this way sometimes, right?
All right.
And that's why Rob's saying like it's a good value target here to bet. So when they do check and call, I think we can discount a lot of hands that we were worried about before because they didn't lead and then they didn't raise. So I do think we can take them off pocket jacks, pocket sixes, pocket sevens, 6-7, jack seven, and I think they probably play their like 7x hands this way that just trip when there's a flush out there because we look like a flush a lot here, so maybe they continue and hope for the board to pair. But other than that, I really think it's like pocket queens, pocket kings, some pocket aces that we're not blocking, and some jack X hands, whether they have a spade or not. So we bet they call. We've very cleverly and savvily left us ourselves a pot-sized bet behind. It's just a terrible card on the river gang. Ugh, there ought to be a law. It is the Jack of Clubs. So the board is now Jack of Spades, six of Spades, seven of Diamonds, seven of Spades, Jack of Clubs. So there's two Jacks and two sevens on the board. We did make our ace high flush on the turn, but this is just a terrible card. Most of the hands that we put our opponent on were one pair hands. And Some of those hands were like pocket queens with a spade, pocket kings with a spade. There's not a lot of combos of those. And then there was just the Jack X hands, the Ace Jack, the Queen Jack, the King Jack. We don't think he has a lot of 10 Jack, but maybe some 10 Jack. Um, and there's just a lot of combos of those. And they're going to make up a lot of the range that our opponent plays this way. And if they have a Jack, like this is a pretty straightforward way of playing. They bet the flop when they were ahead. They check called when the turn got scary. Um, and now this is just a beautiful card for them. And they shove. They've got us covered. They've got like 30 big blinds left. We've got about 20 big blinds left. It's about a 20 big blind pot at this point. And
And I say we
we're
just end it there. We just end it there.
let's just, let's just stop the show. Let's just stop the show right there.
That's enough. We got
I love it, Joe.
because you mentioned the word flawless. I was on the button. It was
Uh,
flawless.
it's
And I
true.
got dealt the
Yeah.
right card. So let's just
I
leave it
got
at that.
really very few notes so far on the play so far. Very few
All right.
notes.
No, go
Um,
ahead.
so they lead out here, and we got to think like, are they bluffing here? Like, what are the hands that they get here with, and then they decide to bluff. Um, I don't even want to go too far down that road, but like that's one of the things that we should be considering here. Are they value betting a hand worse than a full house? That I think probably not. So like if they so let's think about all the hands that we gave them. Pocket queens, pocket kings, and jack X hands. And like ace seven or something maybe. Um maybe well they might do that with the seven because they've made the bottom of a full house. They're definitely doing it with the Jack X hands that made the Big Daddy full house. I think if they have queens or kings, they're probably just checking here. They're not going to turn that into a bluff because they have a better two pair than if you have, pocket eights or pocket nines or pocket tens or something like that. Or um, but they're losing to all your value.
But, but,
But
but we're we're assuming that we're looking for his bluffs.
right,
I don't think there is any.
there's not a lot.
Yeah.
Are they?
No. The only bluff there could be is if he had a naked ace of spades,
Which we have.
which we have. So he can't be bluffing with a flush. Now, there's other possibilities here, though, that we have to think about. Ace. An ace is a chop type hand, right?
Yep.
An ace is a chop type hand. If you have an ace in your hand and you don't have a flush, there's two pair on the board. So unless he has a bigger two pair, or he has, let's say he has eights, pair of nines, pair of tens, pair of queens, pair of kings, and pair of aces. Those all are better than if you were sitting there with ace high
Yep.
because you have a better two pair. You have a better two pair than jacks and sevens. A lot of times when you get into these double paired boards, you're looking at opportunities to bet somebody off a chop.
So you're
Now, I don't
saying
know
if
if going all in is the best way to do that, but based on his stack sizes, but it could definitely be that he is either overvaluing his two pair, which is bigger than the two pair on the board, or he's trying to take you off of a chop with an ace.
yep. And so in a lot of these two pair of spots, like you're saying, Rob, if both players have an ace and it
Mhm.
gets to showdown, it's a split pot because they both have two sevens and jacks to the ace. Um,
Right.
so if you think it's likely that your opponent also has an ace, that's a real good reason to bluff with an ace in your hand here because you put them off the chop and you win the hand. Um, and they might even fold a hand like pocket eights or pocket nines or pocket tens that we're behind of. And I do think some players will take a hand like pocket queens with a spade here and turn that into a bluff. or maybe we had like
Is it a
king.
bluff or are they just overvaluing their hand?
I mean, they're
You know,
definitely overvaluing their hand if
it's
they
not a
think it's a
bluff
value
unless
bet.
right. It's not a bluff unless they think it's a bluff.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
That's not a
That's a
bluff.
good
If
point.
somebody overvalues their queens there,
It's true. It's
that's
true. It's
they're
true.
trying to get value from the guy with the ace.
Yeah,
You know,
right. Yep.
that the guy's going to call you with an ace because that's a chop. Is he
Or the
trying to
guy
bet
with
me off a chop? Yeah,
or if they had pocket eights or pocket nines or pocket tens,
right.
queens and jacks are
Yep.
better than
Yep.
jacks and eights. So there's
Yep.
a real small value target there as well, I think for
Yep.
sure. Um,
Yeah,
I
I just
think
don't think
honestly,
there's
like
any bluffs. I don't think there's any bluffs here.
their only bluffs have to be hands that have like one high spade in them that they got here with. The draw didn't come in. Like I'm kind of grasping to find a hand that
Well,
has
like I say,
a king or a queen of spades.
on a two-paired board, are you trying to bluff this flush?
But you need to bluff something. And like you
No,
say, we're
you
kind of
don't.
out of we're well,
This
if we're
we're
going to.
recreational players. We don't bluff hardly at
Yeah.
all.
Well, this is what I'm learning with Matt Affleck, with the Matt Affleck coaching sessions, is part of your range construction is you need to have bluffs on future streets, which means that you kind of need to continue with some non-intuitive, some counterintuitive combos on earlier streets so that you can still have bluffs here or you just don't get to bluff here, which is again like maybe not the end of the world. Um,
Okay,
but
let's put it this way. What hand does he call the turn with that he now
right,
bluffs the river?
yeah, that's a tough one. It would have to
Yeah.
be, yeah, God, that's a tough one. It's true, and that's why it's like the pocket pairs are the only ones. They're the only ones. It's the pocket pairs that have a
Yep.
spade.
And they're not bluffing.
I agree with you 100%. So so we're looking for bluffs here, Joe, and it's like what we can't find any.
Yeah.
Um, So
But
they lead.
there's still hands that he's overvaluing,
Sure.
trying to get value from that we are actually ahead of.
So that would be like if they did shove, if they did play like an overpair,
Hmm.
queens, kings, or aces,
Yep.
would they do that for value? Even though maybe I don't know if that's better than a check call line in this exact spot, but whatever, if you're getting it in either way.
Yeah, the only bluff I think would be an ace high hand.
Right.
And what you're really doing there is you're just trying to bluff them off a chop.
So we would, I guess the problem is like what we'd really like them to have is a smaller flush. But does a smaller flush shove here?
No, no,
And I
not a
don't,
double paired, but not the way the hand was played because Joe can have a seven so easy in
yeah.
this scenario. So if the
So,
guy had a king high flush, is he really going to go all in and try to get you to fold your full house?
but that's why I don't
I
think
don't
they're
think so.
betting. I don't think that's why I don't think they're overvaluing the big pocket pairs too, because it's the same thing, right? It's like, it's a very ambitious, but oh yeah, because like, are they value betting? Because they're never getting called by worse there. All right. Anyway, I don't want to, we could talk about this forever. I like that we're getting
Well,
some different, yeah,
it's the ace. It's the fact that it's a double paired board and the
yeah.
ace is typically going to win unless you get that guy off his ace. He's going to win unless you
Mhm.
have unless you have a jack or a seven.
So all right, so we can find a few combos that this player might bet here, whether they're bluffing or whether they're too thinly value
Overvaluing.
betting. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So there could be some combos here. Um, how do we think that those are uh a big part of their shoving
Mm-mm.
range here, a small part?
I
Um,
don't think they're shoving with those types of hands, to tell you the truth.
right.
We're just going through all the possibilities there. But if you think
Yes,
about it, why would they shove with pocket queens?
I agree.
When the way Joe played it, he has a seven all day long.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, if he doesn't have the flush, he has a seven.
And as we noted, this player has 30 big blinds behind. Joe only has 20. So they actually could bet like 8 big blinds here
Right.
and put
Right.
us in a really difficult position.
Yep.
That would be a good way to like get us off a chop or something like that. So when they do shove here, it does feel like it's a polarizing play. It's not a middle strength hand unless they're making an error. Um,
Mhm. And
and
there's
we
no
don't see a lot
bluffs.
of bluffs. So that's so that leads me to value. And Rob, one of the things I quote you all the time is, we bet the turn and they called. So this lead on
Mhm.
the river is out of flow. And my buddy Rob Washam, my poker mentor, has said many times, when they lead out on the river, when they lead out big on the river, they always have it.
Yep.
Whether
And
they do or
Rob was
not,
right. Your
in the
mentor
games
was
we've
right.
been playing, yeah, it's true. They do.
And I just
Uh,
had to see it. I had to prove it. I had to
you
have
had
him
to
prove
see
it.
it. Yeah. And so you called.
I
He
called.
shoved, we called. He turns over Jack 10 offsuit, which is a
With
No
no
lighter
spade.
spade.
open.
With no spade.
No spades. Yeah. Just the Jack 10. So we kind of put that at being at the very bottom of their opening range there. We kind of discounted some of the combos there. It's not as likely as some of the other hands, but it is a Jack X hand. It just goes to show like 10 Jack, Queen Jack, King Jack, Ace Jack, suited, offsuit, pocket jacks. There are a lot of Jack X hands that get there like that. And it does make perfect sense when you think about it. Again, he bet the flop when he was ahead. He check called the turn when it got scary, and then now he's got effectively the nuts. So he goes for max value.
And that's what I'm
So
thinking is that's
yeah,
one thing I struggle with. I know we're kind of running long here, but
no, I'm enjoying this. Yeah.
the on the turn, he knows he has a Jack 10 offsuit. So he
Right.
knows his outs are, the seven or Jack.
Yep.
So
Yep.
basically it's four outs is what he has. He knows that, which is only 8% equity, and I'm giving him
Right.
20, 25. So, but is he thinking, and this is where, is he thinking his range, what he's representing, or what is
He's thinking
his
about
thought
your
process there?
range. He's thinking about your range because he doesn't know
Okay.
you have a flush.
Yeah.
If he knew you had a flush, yes, he has those 4 outs. But if you're doing this with a hand that has one spade in it, because he's now given up the turn and now you're betting. So he's invited you to make some bluffs. So against your entire range that's making this half pot bet on the turn, there's all your sevens, there's all your flushes, but there's also
Okay.
the hands that make good bluffs here, like 8-9, 9-10, 10-8. I think hands
Let me
like
ask you this. Let me ask you this, Joe.
Hmm.
If you had let's say you had the ace of spades and of diamonds in your hand,
Hmm.
would you bet on the turn?
it's a candidate, I think is what
I'm
Rob's
asking
getting
Joe.
at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you bet
Probably
with
not.
the nut flush draw on a paired board? Okay, would
No,
you bet
I
with
would
a
not.
pair of nines on the turn with the jack sitting there? I mean, just be honest.
No, I would. No, I would.
Okay,
So that, yeah.
so if we're looking at Joe and we're playing against Joe,
Uh,
the only way Joe is betting on the turn is if he actually has something. Joe is not the maniac that's going to be aggressive as soon as somebody shows weakness.
Mm, hmm.
There's a lot of players that are out there that are like that. If you show weakness, they're going to bet on you with garbage, with absolute air.
uh,
Joe's not one of them. Joe is not going to bet unless he has something. So um I think our villain got very, very lucky.
Yes. Yes. They're definitely, if they put Joe on a value hand, they have very few outs at that point. That's right.
I don't think they were thinking in terms of Joe's range.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
if you look at Joe and if you've been playing with Joe and you know that Joe is not going to be doing those types of overly aggressive maniac type plays, then you know that the only time Joe is betting here, especially half pot on the turn, is when he has a hand. He has a made hand. So he either has a flush or he has a seven. Those are the only hands that Joe's betting there. I can't think of any other hand that you would bet there. Can you,
Hmm.
Joe?
Hmm.
No,
No, that's a good
no.
point. That's a good point. And so a naked jack is in really terrible condition
Correct.
against that
Correct.
range.
Correct. So the biggest mistake that was made was by the villain when he called the turn.
Mm. Hmm.
But he
Well,
didn't have the odds to call based on our read of Joe's range
Right.
for making the bet.
And this kind of gets at what we were saying earlier about the opportunity to raise the flop, Joe, is like if
Mhm.
you're only raising when you have two pair or better, which is what Rob's like suggesting here, then your opponents can exploit you by over folding to spots where you are aggressive, um, which our villain failed to do in this spot. But I think that's a good example of
I'm I'm
how
think
players can use that against you.
I'm thinking he might have folded on the flop to a raise to a raise
yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Top pair? We didn't
with
drive
a
all
10
this way
kicker.
to yeah. Maybe,
He didn't
maybe.
drive
It
it. He
depends
just
on.
drove home from work and
But
opened up his computer.
but one of the other things that's nice about raising on the flop is that you get to continue that strength on future streets. Like
Hmm.
so you raise on the flop and then the flush comes in and like you've already made a bigger pot now, right? And like
Yep.
now you can choose to bet smaller because you don't need to shove because you're going to get it like you want a smaller SPR on the river. So like there's lots of benefits to it that aren't just
Hmm.
getting them to fold necessarily in that spot, although we love it. We love it when they do.
And for future game,
Yeah.
right? For future game, you are now someone that is capable of raising on the flop, raising a continuation bet on the flop with a non-made hand.
Yeah. That does make
And
you
if you
scarier.
you are a much scarier player then.
Yeah,
You
it's
need
true.
to basically up the aggression.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and that's a real argument for, like we say, like these semi-bluff raises,
Hmm.
raising with draws, because most players don't. Like most players just raise with two pair plus.
Yep.
And again,
Very
we can,
easy to
it's
be passive, hoping to hit.
right.
Now, one of the things that we talked about in endgame poker strategy, I believe it was endgame poker strategy, or one of the Daryl Carney books. Your bluffs, you don't have bluffs just to try to get people to fold. You have bluffs because if you never have a bluff, you won't get enough value from your value hands. So when you look at bluffs, I mean, people always, it's really sexy to have a big bluff on TV, right? Everybody's, oh, look at how he had air and he made that guy fold his aces.
Yeah.
Wow. It's all exciting and everything, but the real reason that people bluff is so that they do get paid when they have value.
Yeah.
So that's just
Yeah. It's just
an
the other side of
aside.
that coin. So, well, I don't want to rake Joe over the coals here, but let's talk
No,
about the decision.
yeah, no, yeah, I don't feel that way at all.
All right, good. Let's talk about the
Yeah,
decision on the river. So when we call here, um, we're beating their bluffs because we have a made flush. We have the nut flush. Um, we're beating their too thin value hands that they might make this bet with. Um, but I just don't see them having a lot of bluffs, and I don't see them having a lot of those thin value hands here in real life as played. Uh, So Rob, what's the worst hand you're calling with here? Is it like
Seven.
a seven, the other side of the full house?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a seven. And then I really feel bad about it anyway, but I don't know that I could get away from it.
I might even fold a seven, honestly, given the action, because it's just so likely that they have a jack. Now, a solver would never, you can't fold a seven. You're too high up in your distribution to fold a seven.
Yeah.
Um, but it's just like, it's just so often a jack here. When we look at the in range and we eliminate all these other hands that they would take different actions with on previous streets or choose a different sizing here. Um, it would be different if we could give them more bluffs, if there were more like natural bluffs, but we're having a hard time finding them. And listen, if you're enjoying the show and we're missing some real obvious bluff combos here, please write in, let us know. Nothing would please me more than to find some sneak. My gut tells me they're going to be turning a pair into a bluff if they do it. It's hard to see them getting here with a lot of other hands that aren't one pair or have a spade in them.
Yeah, and I
But the
don't know that
shove is
you're
a,
going to be bluffing all in.
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
was just
Joe.
going to say. The shove is just pretty much evidence that they're not. I mean, that they're not bluffing. That's the that's the giveaway for the most part. I mean,
I mean,
yeah, it
it's
could,
but players are different, right? Like some players
yeah,
they like the overbets are always value. Some players, the overbets are always bluffs. It's like, are they
yeah,
trying to scare you, or is it like, why would he make it so big if he had a value hand? Like, there's all these different levels of we out level ourselves on this kind of stuff more often than
yeah,
anything
yeah,
else.
yeah,
But
yeah.
if they're a thinking
I
player,
have,
it should be
I
a
have
bluff
been,
sometimes and a value hand sometimes. Yeah, Rob.
yes, I was going to say I have been known to bluff all in
Yeah,
certain
yeah,
spots. Certain
yeah.
types of runouts would allow me to bluff all in. Um, it's understanding if your opponent is capable of that.
hmm hmm And I do think the villain in this hand, like they have a ton of exploits. Like they're a creative player. I just don't think there's enough bluffs here, and I don't think they play their secondary value hands this way. So Joe, when you were making the call, when you were debating like what should your choice be, you can really
Hmm.
they've put you all in, so you can only call or fold. Um, what was like try and put yourself in your seat as you were making the decision. Was it like were you thinking, I hope they're bluffing? Were you thinking, I have a flush? Like, were you thinking, damn, it's a full house, but I need to see it? Like, what were you
I
thinking when you
think it was probably.
did you feel like you were winning or did you feel like you were going to lose when you called? I'm curious.
I think it was all three of those. I don't know how you like you read my mind. I mean, it was all three of those. It's like I got to see it.
Right.
I hope they're bluffing. And in
And
reality,
I,
maybe if it wasn't play money, I would have folded. Maybe, but I usually don't know. That's not true because I usually approach this as if as this is real money, just so I can
hmm
learn more. And but it was that was just pretty much a 2 out or 3 outer or whatever it was. So I was like, heck with it.
Yeah.
I'm just I
Yeah.
wanted to see it, and there
Yeah,
was that. I wanted to see it. It wasn't.
and
It was
you hear people say they're like, oh, if he's got the jack, good for him. You know, like it was
yeah.
he hit his two
Well,
outer and
I didn't think that to be not. I did not think good for him at all. But just if he's got the
yeah,
jack, so be it. Not good for him, but
yeah.
yeah. So I wanted to see it,
So
and I was hoping
there's
he was bluffing. I just
okay, that's what I want to
yeah.
talk about. And the
I
last
did.
yeah, so
Yeah. But like what you guys just went through, statistically, that's very, 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 very low chance of that. The
that's
probability of that was very small.
that's the point that I want to address is we all like Bud, we're often hoping that they're bluffing. Like hoping that they're bluffing is a constant state of existence for poker players. But like so when you get that feeling, and this is real advice, when you get that
Yep.
feeling like, oh, I'm gonna call here, I hope they're bluffing. Take the 30 seconds that you're allowed at the table, or
Yeah.
take your time and try and think about, okay, what hand did they call on the turn and now they're bluffing? Like just it's and you're not going to be able to go through the whole hand and like range them accurately from pre-flop all the way down. But just try and imagine like okay, so what on the previous street, what hands would have taken that action and then bluffed here? Um, and if you can't think of any, you just don't get to call. You just like that's your reward for coming up with some realistic bluff combos is to be able to call and close the loop in your mind and see what they actually had.
Yeah.
But if you can't come up with any, that's you telling yourself, boy, I wish they were bluffing, but like that's not a plan. That's a wish. Uh,
Yeah.
hopes and plans are different.
There's so
Yeah.
many times where I have lost a huge hand by calling on the river. And my thought process at the time was, well, he could have bluffs here.
Mhm.
But then I take that hand later and I go over into the lab and I start breaking it down. And when I break it down, I find out that no, he, he doesn't have any bluffs here. There's absolutely zero bluffs that he could have based on the way the hand was played. So your brain your brain is telling you, oh yeah, he could have this, he could have that, because you want so badly to call and win that hand because you've got the nut flush for God's sakes. What are
Yeah,
you
exactly.
waiting for?
Yeah.
You want to win that hand. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've gone into the
Yeah.
lab and said, what the heck was I doing? It's the only hand he could have had that would have played that way. And he would had me crushed,
Yeah.
And you're
and
the, I
it's
know,
just
Rob,
human
I'm with
nature.
you.
Yeah.
Every
It's
time
just human nature. Yeah.
I'm in one of the chats podcasts like tonight, when you ask who's your poker nemesis, every time I think me, myself.
Yeah.
I'm my own poker. Like that's how I would answer that. It's me.
Well,
Yep.
especially as we are, ascending in the poker world and as we're getting more experienced and learning
Yeah.
more, for a lot of recreational players, the inclination is to call. Like the demon that we have to fight is the calling demon.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because we want to make hands, so we call
Yeah.
pre-flop, and we want to like see if they had it, so we call
Yep.
post-flop.
Yeah.
So calling is what we kind of need to fight back against earlier in our growth as a player, because we don't believe the math, we don't believe the combos, and we haven't burned our hand on the stove enough. We haven't been shown the nuts when they lead on the river often enough
Yeah.
that we're like, oh, this is a good spot to bluff. They could be bluffing here. I call.
Yeah.
Um, Eric Jin talks about this. So this is a second Eric Jin reference today. He's also the first thing is he came up with this phenomenal system of naming positions at the table that's
Yeah.
much better than what's in use right now. But he also talks about this human nature phenomenon of us wanting to close the loop. We don't like having open loops in our mind. And if you fold, you don't get to see what he had. Now, for the rest of the night, you're going to be like, that's going to be nagging you. It's going to be this open loop in your mind that's bugging you. And so, like, there's therapeutic value in just calling and finding out and knowing. It's true.
That's
It's
a good
true.
point. Yeah, it is. I laugh about it, but I never thought, yeah, therapeutic
So,
value.
therapeutic value, right?
Yeah, for
And
own
so when
peace
we're
of
when
mind. I
we're
gotta know.
right, and
Yeah.
listen, that's an exploit. Like when experienced players play against recreational players, they know you want to call. And so they're going to put you in spots where, like, that's the mistake that you're going to make. We talked earlier about, like, what kind of mistakes are our opponents going to make? Our mistake is going to be we want to call.
Yep.
So they're going to put us in positions where we're going to make that error. And it's our job to say, do we want to call, or do we think calling is actually the most profitable outcome available to us here? Because we're always going to want to call. We're recreational poker players. Uh, but like, is it a sound decision? Is a much less fun question that we have to ask ourselves. And it unfortunately often comes down to math, which is also not very fun. Why do we play this stupid game again? This sounds really boring and stupid. Like, what are we even doing here? But yeah, so thank you, Eric Jin, for planting those seeds in our community. And thanks, Joe Millay. This was a really good we took quite a while talking about this.
Yeah, I'm glad I brought it up. I'm glad you guys have come. I thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate the feedback. I'm
Well,
not embarrassed. I mean, it's just, you live and you learn. That's part of the
yeah.
evolution.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Joe, you've had such a good mindset about this. So you became a premium member less than a year ago, I think, and you've been diving
Yeah.
into the study groups. You've been posting, you've been present in a lot of our conversations. And I can see your play improving, and I can see the questions that you're asking improve and like showing your deeper understanding of the game. And buddy, I've been playing poker for almost 40 years now because I started when I was just a tyke, and I make huge bonehead decisions basically every single time I play. And I got to bring those to the forums. I got to bring those to the Rec Poker Discord channel, because that's the only way I'm going to get better is by sharing my defeats with all of you wonderful people and getting some encouraging feedback. And that's kind of what it's all about here at Rec Poker. So kudos to your excellent learning mindset, and keep it up. We're never going to get
Thank you.
perfect, but we're all going to get better, no doubt.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
And if you're a premium member and you're listening along, join us. Come on in for the forums one of these days. It's a lot of fun. You can get some very specifically tailored to
Yeah.
you analysis from some of our RecPoker Crew members, and
Yeah.
a lot of them are
That
much
was a
better at
good.
poker than I am. So
I'd like to
do it.
second that because this is the second time I remember when there was once about playing tournaments or sit and goes, and that was
Oh
the
yeah.
entire. It was just show up and ask a question, and you'll get a heck of an answer.
Duh, I love it. Well, we're not going to find a better high note than that, I don't think, folks. Come join us for free over at Rec Poker. And like I say at the beginning of the show, if you want to give our premium membership a try, you can use the code RecPoker at checkout to get your first month for only $5, or just support a local food bank and send us the proof of payment for a donation of even just $1 or more. We'll happily credit you with a free month at Rec Poker. So come see what all the fun's about, and be like Joe. Get your game
That's
to the
right.
next level and have a freaking swell time doing it. All right. Well, I have to thank Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. Oh, yeah. And we do have dates, folks. This is going to come out in December, which means you've got time to plan. The next Rec Poker weekend at Running Aces is going to be on the weekend of January 31st to February 1st. That Friday and Saturday are going to be chock full of exciting tournaments and fun social stuff, cash games, meet and greets, probably a couple of beers if I know this group. And it'll be a lot of fun. So if you're in the Twin City area, come on up. And if you're not in the City area, we're trying to arrange some discounted rates for hotel rooms right there on the property. If you haven't been to Running Aces yet, you should really check it out. Go to runaces.com to find out more about that. And I hope that you can come and join us in the last weekend of January there. Um, and I also want to say, last pitch. If you'd like what we're doing here at the show, please go to rec.poker/support to find out some ways to help us out without spending a dime, and some ways that you can also spend some dimes. We appreciate all kinds of help. And thanks so much for tuning in to the Rec Poker Podcast. My thanks to Running Aces, Joe Millay, Rob Washam, everyone in the forums and the Discord, all our premium members, you listening at home. Thanks for all your support. Have a great week. We'll see you next time on the Rec Poker Podcast. All right, good night, everybody.